Hey YouTubers, I'm Jacob, and this is a how-to video for installing some aftermarket gauges on an older vehicle. Now this is on my 79 Bronco with the 400 block motor, and I want to have some more accurate gauges to know the true temperature of the coolant within the block. I'm also going to be installing a new oil pressure sensor and a voltage sensor as well. I don't have a whole lot of confidence in the factory gauges, and it doesn't give me an actual temperature reading. It's more just low or high or hot. So this should give me a better reading on how the motor is actually running when going down the road. I've included links to all the products and tools I'm using in the description below, so make sure to click on those and check them out. And I'm posting weekly videos, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow along. All right, let's get into it.
The first thing I'm doing is the positive and negative connections for the gauge lighting and voltage meter ground. I'm adding blade connectors to make installation and removal of the cluster much easier.
Okay, so I finally got this sensor through the grommet. I'm going to want to wipe this off and clean off some of this grommet material that got onto it. This should be easy enough that we can feed this through our hole now, fit this grommet in place, set our cluster down, and then we should be able to feed the rest of the wires through here that we need to get to the engine bay. I already went ahead and made my own little electrical harness here, and this will allow me to connect the cluster up to some of the existing connections I have for the lights and also for key on feature. So this way I can just quickly disconnect this, or if I want to take this out in the future, it's just pretty easy to take apart. So it's not included with this harness. All right, so I'm gonna clean this up and then we'll go into the cab and start feeding this wire through and feeding all our other wires through, like this one as well, which will be for the oil pressure. And then we can get this mounted up. We'll wait to plug in the electrical until we get these connected at their ports in the motor.
Before doing anything, disconnect the negative from the battery to reduce risk of shock. Then take apart the dash to allow for better access and routing of cables.
So we're going to hook up our oil pressure. Really careful not to lose that. You're going to thread the nut on first on the nylon tubing. Give myself some room, and then this barb will go on there like that. And this needs to be about 1/8 of an inch up the line. There's 1/8 of an inch. Really not much. Like that. I just bottomed it out in the back. They'll like pull it up just a little. When we do test this, make sure put some towels down to see if there's any leaks, because it could potentially leak oil through here on the back side. For the temperature sensor, the temp sender on the engine, opening on the water pump here, there's a bolt right there plugging it right next to the temp sender, and that one is where we're going to add our temperature sensor. Now a lot of people will add them at the top of the thermostat, but honestly it's not accurate until the thermostat opens. So this will give you a more accurate reading of temperature in the block. So in order to get to this, I'm going to need to remove my alternator. I'm going to get an impact in there to take this bolt out, because I know I sunk it in there pretty tight. You're going to want to make sure you got a catch pan down there, because we will leak coolant when we remove it. 11/16. I think it's this one. Yep. And I'm going to put plumbing tape on this before I insert it. Make sure it gets a good seal.
All right, we got the coolant sensor hooked up. Now it's time for the oil pressure sensor. This one's gonna be really interesting with the hood on because it's so far back in the motor. It's gonna be really difficult to get to. I really wish my hood was off. Like most of you, probably gonna leave your hood on. And it's here at the back of the motor, I'll show you.
Okay, so I had to get some stubby wrenches to get the oil pressure sensor off towards the back. And because of my vacuum tree, I'm not gonna be able to go back with the OEM style can, which is a pretty big sensor. So I went ahead and bought a standard Motor Products sensor. It's a lot smaller, and this way I'm not interfering with the vacuum tree. I've got all this brass fittings together. I went ahead and put some Teflon tape on it, and this is where the aftermarket sensor will come in. I'm gonna go ahead and take the old one out and then screw this one down in on the tree and get it plugged in.
I'm using some existing wire T-taps for my cluster harness for making the light switch and key on power. This existing T-tap is for my Vintage Air AC kit and is temporary until I can get a proper wiring harness kit for the Bronco.
Here's a quick tip on a way to test your power to aftermarket gauges. If you're having any issues with voltage or lighting or anything else like that, you think you may be getting dirty power or you think you have a faulty gauge, one way you can check for sure is this voltage gauge was jumping all over the place for me. I called into Equus and they recommended using jumper cables, connecting it to the positive and then connecting it to the positive on the battery. And this also verifies if your ground is good or if there's something else wrong with the gauge. Turns out now it's not jumping around, it's solid. So it could be that I tapped into a key on switch and I put a splitter on it, and it turns out it's kind of getting some interference by doing it that way. So I'm gonna have to run my cable and tap it somewhere differently or just run it off the battery.
Once you have everything hooked up, take your vehicle for a cruise to verify that everything is working correctly. As you can see, adding some aftermarket gauges can be very handy, especially if you have an older vehicle where the gauges may not be reliable. I've got many more videos on my 79 Bronco and 2015 F-150, so don't forget to subscribe to follow along. I've included links to all the products and tools I used today, as well as the Equus gauges in the description below, so make sure to click on those links and check them out. Thanks for watching.